Hello, and welcome to Conversations Worth Your While, a show in which I chat with really cool people about interesting topics to spark, inspire, and motivate personal and professional change. And today's topic is how to get out of your own way to build outstanding relationships. This conversation is worth your while because every day we're building relationships, whether deliberately or not. We build professional relationships, our personal relationships, platonic, romantic, and relationships are a keystone of how we function in our everyday lives. As we come out of this pandemic, we have the opportunity to be back in the community and back in the game to reignite existing relationships and build new ones. So, we are going to cover a few things today. We're going to cover how relationships affect all aspects of our lives. We'll talk about how we're in our own way when it comes to cultivating relationships, and then we'll give you three things you can do right now to get out of your own way and build the relationships that you want. So let's start with some introductions. I'm Linda Bucher. I'm a heart-centered master coach and mindset mentor, a transformative speaker, and an author. And if you're excited about making a positive impact on the world and you feel this bigness inside of you that you know you're meant to share, and you want to do more, be more, and have more joy, more fun, more balance, and more impact, then you want to connect with me, and I'll help you unleash that bigness inside of you and make an impact while living a balanced, rewarding life. And today I have the pleasure of being joined by Carlisle Lipke of Dale Carnegie of Western New York and Greater Boston areas. And Dale and Carlisle helps her clients to think clearly about where they're trying to go and what might be getting in their way. So, hi, Carlisle. Thank you for being with us today.
Hi, Linda. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. Can you tell us a little bit more about who you are, who you serve, and why this topic is worth your while?
Yeah, absolutely. So at Dale Carnegie, like you said, I help people think more clearly about where they're trying to go, what might be getting in their way, and whether, again, like it's a platonic relationship or a personal relationship or a professional relationship. Building relationships is at the heart of everything that we do. And that's one of the big things that we focus on at Dale Carnegie, because so many times relationships might be what's getting in your way.
That's very true. So that is a beautiful segue into our very first topic today, about how relationships do affect all aspects of our lives, how there is a ripple effect. I'll let you kick that off.
Absolutely. I mean, when there's one relationship that isn't functioning properly, it has this ripple effect of how it affects all of our other relationships. I was working with a client who was experiencing so much stress at work because he was a general manager, and one of his managers, they just weren't clicking. They couldn't get on the same page. They didn't have a lot of trust in between them. And so what he noticed was, because that relationship wasn't functioning, he was stressed and frustrated. And then when he would go home, he would bring that stress and frustration back to his wife and to his family. And then that started affecting their relationships. So again, so even just one relationship, if we can improve even just one relationship, what could the positive ripple effects be?
That's very true. Yeah. And I think that's something that everybody can identify with, having a relationship that's maybe going downhill or a little bit rocky, and noticing the effects on our mood and how we are treating other people. And then the other thing is, when relationships are not at their best, not only does it have this ripple effect of affecting other people, but it affects our eating. We stress eat. It affects our sleeping. Our brain keeps going. We're unable to get a good night's rest. So if the ripple effect is greater than just even, which is bad enough, the ripple effect on the people who are important in our lives and how we might show up at work and in our relationships at home. If we have a work relationship that's struggling, and vice versa, if we have a home relationship that's struggling. So yeah, and it really undermines our productivity, our creativity. There's a lot of ripple effects, which is
Right,
why we are talking about this topic today.
right. Absolutely.
So, our topic title is basically insinuating, in a very obvious way, that we are in our own way when it comes to cultivating the relationships that we want. Um, in your experience, how do you notice that people are in their own way?
Well, getting in our own way is one of the things that as human beings we are the most talented at. at the core of what we are, we have this reptilian brain. And even though we've evolved, and even though we're all on our own journeys to develop ourselves, there is that reptilian brain that sometimes just takes over and says, me, I must eat, I must find shelter, I must survive. And sometimes that just kicks in. And when it does, it's a thing that just gets in our own way. And it's something that stops us from being our best self.
That's very true. Yeah, we are inherently selfish creatures.
Mhm.
And, we're not our best selves. We're not our best selves when we're all stressed out. How we just actually talked about that in our previous topic. Um, Another way that we get in our own way is people pleasing. We do that in an effort to try to make a relationship better, but that's not really what's happening. When we're people pleasing, it's out of our own insecurities. And I remember I had a client who was so completely overwhelmed. She had no time to do anything. And whenever she would miss something, she would really beat herself up. Um, and she didn't know how to say no. Everything was yes, yes, I can do that. Yes, I'll do that. Yes, I want to do this. She wanted to do it all. But what she didn't understand was why she was doing it all. And we had to work together to discover that. And what came out of it was so fascinating. She had been doing so many things to prove her significance. And that was a big wow for her. Like, whoa, hold on. So that week I told her for her homework, I said, I'd love if, make your to do list and make your to do list. Cause I always, we don't always get to our to dos, but we're still doing stuff. That's your to do list. And at the end of each day, I want you to circle which of those things you did to prove your significance. And when we talked the next week, she was like, oh my gosh, 75% of the things on my list are to prove my significance.
Wow.
And in her attempt to prove her significance, she was so stressed out that all her relationships were like messy. And so she took 75% of those things. She goes, I'm going to stop doing those. I put those on my stop doing list, which was the third list I had her create. Put them on the stop doing list. And she was able to breathe. She was able to remember to do the things that were most important to her and cultivate those relationships most important to her. It eased up her home life, for sure. It eased up her um, expectations of herself, right? So she could just breathe. And when she could breathe, she could be her best self for her family and for her work. So this people pleasing thing, at the heart of that is something deeper. So, like, why am I saying yes and trying to please all these other people? What is the reason? And when we can, let go of that, like that's a, pretty cool thing. But when we're overwhelmed and we're all stressed out and our relationships are suffering, it's because we're in our own way, in that way that we are feeling insecure in our significance, or our worthiness.
Yeah. And
Um,
that's something, just the story that just popped into my head when you were saying that is, I do a lot of work with lots of different nonprofits and local organizations. And I can't tell you how many times I work with people on committees who say yes to everything. Of course, I'll be on this committee. Of course, I'll be on this committee. And they get stretched so thin that they're not actually, bringing any value to the organization. And I think it's something important for people to remember that any organization would rather have you say no, honestly, than say yes and then drop the ball and then, not really, come up to your commitment. So that's another important thing, is sometimes saying no is the right answer, not just to yourself, but to anything that you want to commit to.
that's very true. Yeah. Another way that people get in their own way is fear. Fear of the future, right? Fear of things that we can't control. I always, most people's fears are like, what if fears? What if this happens? What if that happens? What if the other thing happens? And they're afraid. Sometimes the fear is around those relationships, oh, I have to be in my best behavior because what if this person doesn't like me anymore? Or what if I don't get this promotion? Or, so they're doing what they're doing out of fear of the future and fear of things that they really believe they can control, but they really can't. And when it comes to the future, I always say to my clients, oh, you can predict the future. Would you please just tell me tomorrow's winning lottery numbers? Because I'd like to buy that ticket today. And they say, well, no, I guess I can't tell the future. So then what they're doing is they're spinning a story, a future based story that is, inciting fear inside of them. And I said, if you're going to make up a story, why would you make up a story that scares you? Why wouldn't you make up a happy story? A happy story, a story that
Right.
goes your way. You're making it up anyway. And then
Right.
we've got these things that we can't control that we're afraid of. Again, we make up stories about that. What if, what if, what if? And there's so many things we believe we can control that we really can't, like what other people think of us. That is something totally not in our control.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought that up, because that's one of the things too, is when you're talking about, oh, what are other people going to think? What are, are people judging me? Are people, oh, I can't do this because someone's going to judge me. The truth of it is, everyone's thinking about themselves. You are not that important. No one is spending that much time thinking about you. Let it go, Elsa. Like, it's not, like you said, all those things, the what if, the what if, the what if, no one's paying that close attention to you, you know?
Yeah, and what people don't realize is, are you going to be judged? Yes, and that's not in your control, because what other people think of you has everything to do with their own fears and their own insecurities. It's like a big giant mirror. So they can't see you any better than they can see themselves. And that's a really important notion to, mull around for everybody.
Mhm.
It's really like if someone is picking on you, hold the mirror up, because they're really picking on themselves. It's called You Spot It, You Got It. And it works both in good ways and bad ways. You spot it, you got it. So, we cannot control what other people say, how they behave, what they think of us. It's just completely outside of our control.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's move on to three things that people, our audience right now, you can do to get out of your own way and build the relationships that you want.
Yeah, definitely the first one goes with what we were just talking about, is what we can control and what we can't. We like to talk about that there are two buckets, right? So you've got the big bucket over here, and the big bucket is things you can't control. And over here, you got a little bucket of things that you can control. Many of us like to spend all of our time in the big bucket, focusing on the big bucket, when in fact, when you can take some time to really focus on the little bucket, the big bucket starts to look a lot differently. So that's the first thing that you can do, is take a look at your buckets. What is in each bucket, and focus on the bucket of what we can control.
Yeah, and it makes you feel more powerful, more in control, because that's what we're trying to do, is feel in control and feel powerful, empowered. I know is a little buzzword, but it happens. You feel empowered when you focus on what you can control, because then you can move forward and take action according to your priorities and what is in your control. And I always like to quote Byron Katie, who says, when you argue with reality, and reality is all those things outside of your control, you lose, but only 100% of the time. So she's wonderful. That's a beautiful quote.
Absolutely.
Um, so another thing, the second thing that someone can do right now to get out of their own way is about how to focus on what the other person's saying. I'd love if you would elaborate on that.
Yeah, it's one of the biggest things that we focus on when we're building relationships with Dale Carnegie. And again, the name of the book is How to Win Friends and Influence People, right? So it's all about building relationships. And one of the 30-person principles that we talk about is to get genuinely interested in the other person. And the key word there is genuine, right? So when you're talking to someone and having a conversation, you're building a relationship. We mentioned earlier, all day, you're building relationships, whether intentionally or unintentionally. So when you're talking to someone, you can kind of sit there and nod your head and go, yeah, 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 and just wait for your turn to talk, or just wait to respond. But if you can get genuinely interested in the other person, you're building a stronger relationship, you're building trust, by showing them that you're genuinely interested in their needs, in their wants, in what motivates them. And you find that when you do that, all of your crap goes right out the window because you're interested in someone else. You're not thinking about your shopping list. You're not thinking about those emails that are piling up because you're genuinely focused on another person.
Yeah, that's really the way to be genuinely focused on the other person is you've got to, get out of your head, get out of, your own stuff for that moment that they are speaking with you. And a good way to test if you have been listening genuinely is to repeat back what you hear that they're saying. Um, so it's a beautiful thing that makes the other person feel important. None of us want to be on the end of a conversation where we're talking and the other person's looking around and looking at their watch, and you can tell they're just not focused on you. It's like, why am I wasting my time with this? So, if we really want to have outstanding relationships, it starts with us being genuinely interested in what the other person is saying. I absolutely love that. Thank you for bringing that up.
Like, how many of us are guilty of listening to respond versus listening to understand? I mean, I know I'm guilty of it all the time, but if you can start to do it less than normal, then you're on the right track.
Yeah, just catch yourself and course correct along the way. Absolutely. And the final way to that you something you do right now to build the relationships you want is to understand what was introduced to me as the one third rule of tribes. I do not know its origin. If I did, I would totally give them credit. I don't know who it is, but here's how it goes. In the whole world, there are a third of the people who don't get you and they really don't want what you have to offer. They're really not interested at all. Okay. And you know who they are. Some of them might be very close and important to you. Then there's another third who sometimes get what you get who you are and get what you're doing and want to have what you are doing. And sometimes they don't. And here's the thing about these two thirds. It's no matter what you do, no matter what you do. And you know people in each one of these thirds. And sometimes these are important relationships, the people in these thirds. Then there's this final third. And this is like your third. And your third is the people who lean in, who naturally get you, who want what you have to give, no matter what you do. Mm-hmm. So the things to do right now, once you understand this, you can be like, oh, now I get it. Yeah, this person, I've been trying to explain to them, like, I've been trying to explain to my dad for, 58 years who I am, because he doesn't get it, but he loves me like crazy. Yeah. And so I need to recognize this and do two things. One is release my expectations that these two thirds of the people that I know are supposed to get me, are supposed to want to know me, are supposed to want to get what, want what I have to offer. To release that expectation, because it's just statistics. It's just not, not everybody wants what you have to offer. And that's okay. It doesn't mean anything about you. And the other thing is then you can stop using your energy and your capacity to try to convince, cajole, explain to those two thirds of people. It takes a lot of energy to do that. And you can just accept them for who they are, that they care about you, that they love you, that sometimes they're going to get you and sometimes they're not if it's that third. And then focus your energy on giving to the one third of people who are leaning in, who want what you have to give. It's the most beautiful thing. Again, it was called the one third rule of tribes when it was introduced to me. It's a beautiful notion to know. And if you focus and you practice this and you understand, you can even start by, taking those thirds and putting some names under, like, oh, now I get it. You will free up some capacity. Those relationships will get better because you'll release your expectations of them. And then you can focus your energy on the third of the people who totally get you, and your relationships will thrive with those people as well. So that is the third way.
Absolutely. That's great. Because then you're talking about, and that connects back to what you were talking about earlier about the people pleaser problem. Mm-hmm. If you're trying to be everything to everyone and they're not in that third, not only are you wasting your time and energy, but essentially you're wasting theirs too, right?
Yeah.
So that's a really cool way to think about it. Which third are you in?
Yeah. And you're also like stealing that capacity away from the third that wants it. Give it to them. They want it.
Right.
Don't deprive them. Yeah. So, yeah. Awesome. Well, this has been such a wonderful conversation. I want to thank you, Carlisle Lipke, for being on Conversations Worth Your While. And I know that you have something to share with our audience, and it's called the Golden Book. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and how we can get that?
Yeah, so the first book that Dale Carnegie wrote was How to Win Friends and Influence People, and it's based on 30 people centered principles.
Mm.
And what I'd like to offer everyone is we've got it's got condensed down to what we call the Golden Book. The Golden Book has the 30-person principles, and what I can offer everyone is we're going to have a link where they can reach out to get a link to the Golden Book, and there's also an app available. Well, of course, there's an app. There's an app for everything.
There's an app for that.
We also have the information on where you can download the app so that you can take the Golden Book with you everywhere you go.
Yeah, I really like that. That's nice because sometimes you're sitting in a waiting room and you're waiting and you don't happen to have your physical book with you, and you're like, what were those again? And or maybe I can focus on, you know, one a day, right? For 30 days. I think that would be a really cool thing to do. So I love that there's an app and I'm going to check that out for sure. So thank you very much. And I will put the links to that into the description of this video. So once again, I am Linda Bucher, helping you to lighten your load, unleash that bigness inside of you, make an impact, and live a balanced, rewarding life. And I'd like to thank Carlisle Lipke of Dale Carnegie of Western New York and Greater Boston areas, as well as you, our audience, for sharing your time with me today. So please subscribe and remember to check the description where you'll find our contact information and free tools and resources that we are gifting to you. And until next time, make sure that you've made this conversation worth your while by fueling the spark that it ignited.